Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. Okay, hello, everyone. I'm Chelsea Lake. I'm a member of the events team at Politics and Prose Bookstore, and I'd like to welcome you to PNP Live. Thank you for joining us in this virtual format. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. At any point during the event, you can click on the link that I'll be dropping in the chat to purchase Never Saw Me Coming. And in case you haven't heard, it's the Politics and Prose member sale this weekend. So if you purchase the book on the website by Sunday, you'll get 20% off. I'll also be dropping a link in the chat to become a member. You can ask a question by clicking on Q&A, which can be found near the bottom of your screen. We'll try to get to everyone's questions, but apologize in advance if we don't have time to address yours. We are delighted to offer closed captioning for this event via Zoom's auto captioning service. To access captions, click on the live transcript option at the bottom of your screen. It is now my pleasure to introduce this evening's speakers. Vera Kurian is a writer and scientist based in Washington, D.C. Never Saw Me Coming is her debut novel. Her short fiction has been published in magazines such as Glimmer, Train, Day One, and The Pinch. She was born and raised in the Mid-Atlantic region before stints in New York City and LA. And as she's now returned to Washington, D.C., where she's lived for most of her adult life. She has a PhD in social psychology, where she studied intergroup relations, ideology, and quantitative methods. Kurian is in conversation this evening with Everdeen Mason, an audience editor at the Washington Post, as well as the science fiction and fantasy columnist, reviewing 3 books a month. Her journalism has been published in WAPO, Wall Street Journal, and Refinery 29. Please join me in welcoming them both to PNB Live. Ladies.
Hi. So quick correction, I am not at the Washington Post. That's my old bio. I'm actually the editorial director of games at the New York Times. Just a quick correction. But hi, this isn't about me. This is about my dear friend Vera. I have never been so biased during an interview. Like, I'm just talking to my friend right now. So
we know each other.
Yeah.
Subtext. We're actually friends, coincidentally. And many years ago, Everdeen started hosting these events. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if I wrote a book? And then you hosted the event. So that's what's happening.
I know. I literally responded to the like, can you do this email with like, yes, bish, like all caps. And I was like, I don't know who's even on this email. I'm just really excited. But anyways, really quick, why don't you give us a quick rundown of what the book is about? You're going to do it way better than me.
Sure. Never Saw Me Coming is a psychological thriller. It is about an 18-year-old incoming freshman named Chloe, who is entering a college in Washington, D.C. She is a diagnosed psychopath, and she is actually entering a special program, a clinical panel study, where 7 psychopaths get to go to college for free in exchange for donating their minds and bodies to science for those 4 years. But really what she is there to do is hunt down and kill a boy from her past who grievously wronged her within 60 days of freshman orientation. But what she doesn't know is that someone on campus is hunting down the psychopaths in the study one by one.
You've got that down.
I've said it 500 times in the past month.
I know, somebody asked me what it was about and I spent like 30 minutes like detailing every like character. Anyways, it's fine. But one thing that struck me upon reading this is I feel like a lot of thrillers, part of what makes them so exciting to people is it's you know, a white woman is in danger. She's like in peril. And in this book, technically a white woman is in peril, but she is also the peril. You know, and I think it's really interesting because it's one of those, it's like immediate at page 1, just like, okay, this is what this is for. So like, can you talk to me a little bit about like the decision to have Chloe, you know, a young, beautiful white woman as your main character?
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of thrillers, and I had been reading a lot of thrillers where there was a sort of hapless female character where bad things were happening to her. Her husband had a secret. She like finds a ticket in his pocket and asks him a vague question about it, and he doesn't really answer, and she doesn't follow up. That kind of thing, which I found really frustrating. And then I looked at the, enormous success of Gone Girl and Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, where those are both strong characters who are doing things. So I wanted to write a book about someone who was smart and would ask probing questions. Someone who was kind of calculated and wanted something. She always wants something and is going to like go towards getting it. And she's someone who, take the cool girl speech from Gone Girl. She's someone who kind of weaponizes it. And she, weaponizes her intelligence as well. And maybe isn't aware of it, but she's someone who weaponizes white privilege too. But people, despite the fact that she's on paper a bad person, find her like really charming and endearing. And that was kind of my point, is like I knew most readers would end up liking her and sort of rooting for her to kill this person, even though that's like wrong. She's sort of irresistible.
Yeah, no, I mean, I will say, like, I almost always root for the woman anyway. Women should kill more men in fiction. I'm just kidding. CIA, whoever's listening to this, I didn't say that. But tell me a little bit more about like other thriller tropes that like you really love, that you maybe tried to upend, or maybe you really like doubled down on. Like, we read genre because we like these tropes, right? So could you talk a little bit more about some of those inspirations?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it like a trope necessarily, but definitely the like college setting, which the whole like dark academia thing, I didn't know that was a thing until you told me. But so I wanted that to be the setting, but also thrillers in the past 10 years have been really interested in the unreliable narrator. They've also really been interested in twists. And I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but I wrote the book with the understanding that a lot of people would make assumptions about who is an unreliable narrator and who is not. And it's clearly something I'm playing with in the book. And I also think that, I mean, I kind of say this openly. I'm like sort of someone who's against twists. I like a good reveal and a plot turn, but I think a twist is something entirely different. And a lot of psychological thrillers have been relying like really heavily on like crazy twist, whereas I think of myself as more of an old-fashioned storyteller, where I want you to care about the characters unraveling the mystery, more about you as a reader unraveling the mystery.
Yeah, and actually, I kind of want to ask you a craft question. I mean, do you find that like when you're working on a thriller versus other genres, that you're actually thinking about the audience more? Like I've interviewed a lot of authors. A lot of authors are kind of like, I write for myself, or like the young me, or little girls like me, or however, and that's great. But I think, I'm a very audience focused person. I think you write for audiences, but with thrillers, you really do have to manage their feelings a little, in a sense, and manage like their expectations. So can you talk to me about writing that way? And because you've written up a lot of different genres anyway.
Yeah, I'm kind of a multi-genre author. I mean, I think that for me, I feel I didn't really care whether or not the readers would like Chloe. I mean, I kind of thought they would, but I didn't really care about that. What I cared about is like, for me, a mystery should have fair play. It should be, the clues are on the table. There's no tricks. There's no pulling the rug out from under them, that everything seems like within reason. And that was the only thing that I really thought about the audience of like, is that really something fair? Because my standard for a story is that it's always going to be fair. And I think if you're fair, you satisfy that chunk of readers kind of like in the middle. I mean, there's some readers that are never going to be satisfied, but I'm trying to satisfy the reader who's most like me, basically. And I'm someone who wants like a fair play mystery.
Yeah. And how much of this book and its setting was based off of your own college experience?
I mean, I think I am someone who's in her 40s, writing about people who are 18 and in college. And college is really, really different. Probably that's, when I was there, no one was taking notes on a computer. You took notes on paper. And I do think that some of the like, the dorms and the like Insta friendship with your roommate and like frat parties and that kind of like randomly getting drunk. I think there's a scene in the book where they're drinking triple sec because it's like all they can get, or maybe that's just my life or was back then. That kind of stuff and the cafeteria and like that kind of stuff, I think is going to be similar in any kind of college like that. I mean, the things that were a little bit different is the addition of social media, which they didn't have when I was in college. And I'm actually not familiar with Instagram and had to ask you and other people things about that. Because of course, someone like Chloe would be obsessed with Instagram and like would be on Snapchat and that kind of thing. But I wanted it to very much feel like you were in that kind of enclosed environment. And I feel like for me, setting is as important as an individual character in a book where you want to feel like you're in a place. So you kind of know the layout of the land. So it feels like a real college.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of setting, it was fun to read a book based in DC that wasn't like about people in politics.
Or yeah. Like, and that was important for
National Treasure or something.
Right. Not that isn't a great film starring Nicolas Cage.
Free Chloe goes to steal the Constitution.
She totally would. It's not a political thriller. By the way, people just live in DC and have to put up with, you know, motorcades and protests and not having taxation and representation. But I also wanted like to depict DC. Sometimes I read books that take place in cities that I've lived in where they're depicted as all white, and like New York is not all white and DC is not all white. It's a very Black city. So I wanted to have you walk around and hear people speaking different languages and see like, you know, embassies and stuff. So I'm hoping that will be fun for people who live in DC.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. And no one said, no one's from DC. That's like what people say IRL. It's really annoying.
It is very annoying. And it's such a transient city. I've been living here like basically since 1998, last grad school.
I was one of the transients, but anyways, you know what it is. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, you know, back to the college setting is, you know, Chloe has to, this is one of those books where, like, let's be real, they don't go to class as much as they would IRL, but yes. She does go to these studies and she has to conduct these like experiments and panels as part of the program she's in. And all of those are real, right? These are real studies that have been conducted, right?
Yeah, so the psychopaths in the panel study have to come in periodically to do various surveys and experiments. All of the little surveys or experiments they do are based on classic social psychology studies. You might recognize the trolley problem if you've watched Good Place. That is something that has been studied enormously. And then it was kind of fun to think, how would someone like Chloe respond to this? There's the prisoner's dilemma. If you over the course of September check on my blog, I'll be writing about some of these like little experiments. But the prisoner's dilemma is an enormous basis for game theory in political science. There's the marshmallow study, which I've replaced with M&Ms, which Chloe cheats on because of course she does. And they do get MRIs, they're fMRIs, but the way I describe them is a little closer to regular MRIs. But yeah, so like there's a little bit of my background in there for those of you with a background in psychology.
Yeah. Wait, did you actually have to conduct some of these studies?
I know
psychopaths.
I know. So I didn't. And when I was in grad school, none of those were my area of study, except I was a subject in a prisoner's dilemma experiment once, which was kind of funny. You should check out my blog at some point. That will be there. And I've been a subject in fMRI studies because those were the best ones to get on campus because they actually paid a lot of money. The other ones were often not paying.
Good to know. And you know, what is it about psychopaths that you think is so fascinating? They're the subject of so much fiction, but also we tend to kind of like the psychopaths that become famous for murdering people, we weirdly tend to be super into and idolize and canonize. What do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something about someone whose head seems to work entirely different than ours. If you're not familiar, I mean, people just use the word colloquially all the time to describe anyone who's bad. But specifically, a psychopath is someone who they lack empathy, like this, so they have a sort of callousness. They have issues with impulsivity. They have this sort of superficial charm, which often leads to a parasitic lifestyle. And they can be very manipulative. So, your kind of classic con men. People often refer to serial killers as psychopaths, but I read a study about this, and interestingly, a lot of serial killers are not psychopaths. Like Jeffrey Dahmer, for example, might not be, but Ted Bundy probably was, because it kind of has to line up with the impulsiveness thing of, if you're a serial killer who's plotting out your killings, you have to kind of, be planning before ahead of time and then doing it and then covering it up. And that kind of doesn't line up with the impulsiveness. But I mean, the interesting thing about Chloe is that she's managed to control her impulsiveness enough to get good grades and to try to carry out her plan 6 years in the making of killing this boy, but she's still impulsive enough that sometimes she does things like spur of the moment that are like a bad idea before she can control herself.
It's actually one of my favorite things about Chloe is that she's smart. She knows she's smart. We know she's smart. And then every now and then she's like literally 18. You're like, oh my God, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Well,
that's the thing is, like, if you want to write a strong female character, you can't turn them into like, Wonder Woman, where they're great at everything and they're brilliant and they're this, that, and the other thing of like, no, I mean, real people have flaws, and those flaws have to have a negative impact on what their goal is. I mean, there is one time in particular where Chloe nearly destroys her entire plan because she can't control herself.
Yeah.
What
I love is she doesn't like self-flagellate about her mistakes. Like, I feel like when you read books with characters who are, especially like women and teen girls, there's obviously a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of like, confusion. They feel really bad about their mistakes, or they like dwell on it, or they'll even be like, sorry, I've been listening to a lot of like YA audiobooks, and there's like paragraphs of them being like, I knew it wasn't the right thing to do, but I was so full of emotion. And Chloe is just like, I did it. And it's so fun.
I probably shouldn't have done that. Let me move on, because she's very nimble. She's moving on to the next thing like constantly, which is another thing about psychopaths. You catch them in a lie, they've got another lie ready, and they have like, you can't see the lie on their face. And that's kind of like what's fun about her.
Yeah, but this takes us back to kind of the unreliable narrator trope, where Chloe's perception of what is happening and what she thinks is happening is not always accurate, right?
I mean, it is interesting that to see, now that the book is kind of out there, I'm seeing people saying all of the narrators in this book are unreliable. Like, mild spoiler, I don't think any of them are at all. To me, an unreliable narrator is someone who lies to you, the reader, or has a skewed perception of things. Like, so I would say Humbert Humbert in Lolita, where he's describing what he's doing as seduction when you know that that's not what's happening. But Chloe, as a first person narrator, is kind of chatting with you, the reader. We see her lie very overtly to other people. Does that make her an unreliable narrator? I don't think she is one, but I guess other people do. And there's definitely other narrators who are absolutely not unreliable in any way, shape, or form. And so I don't really know. I don't know what people think.
I always thought about unreliable narrators as people who are lying to themselves. Not
I think that might be the original conception, but the reality is, right now, an unreliable narrator is a woman with memory loss because she got hit in the head or because she drinks a lot. And there should be, I wish there were more narrators that were like kind of the Humbert Humbert, we can't trust this person to tell us the truth. He's telling us all he knows, but what he knows is telling us is bad, and is skewed perception of reality. So
and he does it compellingly, though. He really does.
Yeah, and you have to kind of see through this smoke screen that he puts out. I mean, of course, Chloe presents herself as like great and all these other things, but I mean, she is telling you what she sees, and not withholding very much about what she thinks about things.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing about like unreliable narrators is about what people know and don't know. And that kind of leads to the next thing I want to talk about, which is that like what I also thought was fascinating about your book is that it explores a lot of different power dynamics. And so of course, you know, as the reader, you're really focused on like there's a mystery and there's like murders and there's like a psychopath and whatever, but really there are very natural power dynamics between men and women and between student and teacher and people of color and white people that just kind of like bleeds into everything and also like warps it. And I wanted to hear you talk a little, you know, as much as you can without spoiling, about how some of these like power dynamics shape not just the mystery, but like how these characters are behaving and treating each other.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty interesting. So the most fundamental one is the power dynamic just between a woman and a man, Will and Chloe. Will is a lacrosse player. He's a junior. He's bigger than Chloe, who's like 5'5". Just based on that alone, you put the two of them in the room, he's stronger than her. And that's the assumed power dynamic. And there's a chapter where he sort of confronts her in a hostile way and says something like, you know, I could punch you across the room. And she is utterly not afraid. And she says something like, you know, men are used to women behaving a certain way, but they don't realize every now and then they're going to come across a woman who's not like that. So, I mean, is the power dynamic might be a little different there because he has no idea what she is. And then you have, you know, she is someone that kind of uses the perception that people have of women of like going to the security office and being like, I need help, with like big tears in her eyes, and like gets what she wants that way. But then you also have, you know, she's a student who comes in that doesn't have a lot of money. Neither does one of the other main characters, Andre. And like, how is that different on campus to be someone who's like always trying to hustle on top of doing your work, trying to get good grades? And then, yeah, I mean, I think that she is someone who's very cognizant of what these power dynamics are and how she can try to use them to her advantage, even though she's, you know, maybe physically smaller or looked at as maybe not being intelligent when actually she is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things I actually wanted to talk to you about is like, what do you think? Actually, I'm excited because I feel like when I do these interviews or watch these interviews, it's always like people asking a white person about like how they got into the mindset of this other character. But like, what was it like? What was the research like writing an 18-year-old white woman who is a psychopath? And
I think the psychopath part was the harder part. I mean, the reality is of being a brown person growing up in America who went to a mostly all white school. That was my workshop in learning about white America and like watching Beverly Hills 90210 and that kind of stuff of like, I think I've never really had a problem with that. I think the getting into her mindset as a psychopath. I mean, I read, I'd already, just out of my own interest, read quite a bit of research about psychopathy. And then I read some more of the scientific research, a memoir, and like a few other things to see, you know, like, but also putting yourself, I wanted every psychopath in the book to be different. Because just because you have a diagnosis doesn't mean everyone's the same. And all of the psychopaths have really different perspectives on who they are. Chloe doesn't think there's anything wrong with her. In fact, she thinks she's fabulous. There's someone else in the program who really wants to change themselves. But I did try to be like, well, what would it be like to just have this supreme confidence in yourself and to think that you're great at everything? what would it be like to not feel fear? And, just as women who, well, many of us have read The Gift of Fear, fear has this adaptive purpose of helping us to avoid situations where we could really be in trouble. So think of the problem of writing a thriller where two of the main characters don't feel fear, but you want that emotionality in there. So I tried to put her in kind of perilous situations, like she's in this scary basement because she wants something and you're like, get out of there, it's dark and like someone could come, but she's like oblivious to that. She wants the thing that she's going after. So I tried to put her in these situations where, like when you're watching a horror movie and you're like, girl, don't go in there, but she's going to go in there because she doesn't feel fear, and then she wants whatever goodie it is at the other end of it. So I just tried to apply the research to the individual characters and be like, what would that specific characters, what would their spin be on that particular aspect of psychopathy?
Mm-hmm. And going back to craft, because I'm assuming we have some writers in here. You are one of the most like prolific writers that I know. You're like always, you just like you always have like something going on, and I'm like plugging away at the same like revision for like 7 years. Then I'm like, I could just like go watch anime now. But tell me more about kind of like when you're writing a project like this, like do you have like individual phases for when you do research for a project like this that you do actually need a good amount of it for it to be plausible? So like, where you do research and write, like what's kind of your process about gathering that research and feedback and like incorporating it into your work?
So I think, I'm trying to think of how much research I did before. I don't think it took very long. I wrote this book very fast, as you know, like the first draft was like 6 weeks, which is crazy even for me. But I plot everything out first. I think not doing that is terrible, and you shouldn't do that. And I will die on that hill. And so I knew the ending, and I knew kind of the main characters, and I just sort of like placed them. And I write more or less sequentially. But and then when I go back and do the second, that might be a point where I add more of the research behind it. The amount of research in this book was significantly less than in other things that I've written, because it was basically just the stuff about psychopathy, like the school I was making up. I already knew the psychology stuff, and I already knew the plot. But I am a believer for a mystery. I feel like you have to know the end first and then work backwards to put the clue in the right spaces. And then, oh man, it says my internet connection is unstable.
I can
tell me if I cut out.
You haven't cut out.
Can you see me?
Good right now. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
your video is a little mismatched from your audio, but
I'm wondering if I should
hear you.
Switch to my iPhone. Okay.
Do you want to do that really quick? I'll do my tap. I'm not going to tap dance, but I don't know. I'll like.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay. I pay $100 for internet. Okay, anyway. So yeah, I try to, and then this book has 2 kind of separate plot lines that become interwoven. So then that was a lot of like note cards and post-its and trying to make sure that I could tie these together in a way that made sense, where they weren't completely disparate, which they kind of were in the first draft. So I had to work them together. So during that period of time where I was revising, no writing, just working with note cards and post-its and, writing synopses of like, what if this happened? What if it happened this way? And then what if it happened this way? And I did that for quite a while before I sat down to actually write, because I was writing too fast and I needed to slow down to like figure out the plot.
I wish writing too fast was my problem.
Yeah, it's a different type of problem, because then you could write an entire thing and then, I wrote the entire thing and then I queried it, and then an agent pointed out this like glaring problem with the draft. And as soon as they said it, I was like, oh, and I just withdrew it from all agents, and I was like, I have to fix this like glaring. I can't say what it is because it's a huge spoiler. Yeah. I'll tell you later. But it was just such a huge problem that I was like, I can't believe I didn't see that. Yeah. But that's what happens.
Yeah, well, I know, because had you written this book when we started hanging out?
You read the very first draft.
I did read the very first draft. Yeah, you're right. But I'm curious about, so what, because I know like a part of your story is, Never Saw Me Coming is what, like your fourth book that you've written? Fifth?
Fourth as an adult, yes.
Fourth as an adult. And I know you've queried all of those books. So could you talk a little bit about like this process of, like, full disclosure, when V got the call from an agent, me and another friend were like creeping in her house,
Listening.
on the phone, and we were just listening, like being like, shh, be quiet. And like Albie, her little dog, we were just like, shh, quiet, Albie, like we're spying. So it was very exciting. But I know that it was a long time coming for you.
It was a long slog. I mean, I wrote a literary novel in 2013 and I queried that, and I feel like I came close a few times. Got probably like 200 something agents. And I mean, I got very despondent. Like there were emails I sent where I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I started getting into competitive conferences at that point, and they would give you a meeting with an agent, like, great, except it's an agent who's already rejected me. So it's very embarrassing. And then I wrote a science fiction novel, which I also queried, and I got requests on that. And then that had some major plot points. And then I was trying to work on a revision for that when I got the idea for this. And it was just so like viral and propulsive that I just wanted to write this. So then I wrote this, and then queried it, and then realized I had that huge problem, and then rewrote it. And then I think it was a year after my current agent, Rebecca, asked for it, I actually sent it to her because I had been rewriting it. So it's very easy to like look at the author with the like big book deal and be like, wow, they're so lucky. But actually, like, I've been rejected thousands of times in between short stories and agents and conferences I didn't get into. It's just constantly being rejected. And aside from the writing, the other part of being a writer is the business end of like understanding how to get an agent and not sending them a weird aggressive email, or like accosting them in a bathroom, or like being a decent human being when you get an editor or like a publicist or whatever. So there's this whole other part of being an author that you have to learn about too, in addition to just writing the book. That's the first battle.
I'll remember when I got rejected from one residency and then never did anything again.
Yeah, and I was like, you got to get used to getting rejected over it. And eventually, I feel like it stops hurting, I think. I promise. I used to be very, very like upset when I got a story rejected, but now I'm just like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, you have a lot of confidence in what you write. One of my favorite things about V, for the audience, is when you give us something to read and then you're like, I just want you to know that I know you're going to say that this is a weird thing, but I'm not changing it. And I love when you give that to us as part of as part of the manuscript. Like, how did you adopt that level of like, this is just what I want to say?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's an issue with workshopping. I mean, for writers, I notice a lot in the chat because I can see you workshop. A lot of them go to workshops, and I think workshops are great and amazing for people. I feel like at some point you need to leave them or not take them as seriously, because developing your own voice means sometimes that like in your heart, like this is how the story goes and I'm not going to change it. So I think it's better to go into workshop to be like, this is kind of the goal that I want for this. Is this opening snappy? You just don't want random feedback from people about something where it's not something you're interested in changing. It's you're determining the vision for that piece. And I have this story actually about 9/11 that's supposed to make you feel terrible and more terrible with each chapter. And I got a lot of bad, like, negative feedback from it when I workshopped it. People really liked it, but then it's like they wanted something to make them feel good, but like that's not the point of the story. So you as an artist have to determine like what is your point. And there's some things that you can change and we're willing to like work with, and there's other things where you're like, if someone tried to maybe for example, Chloe's character arc, she doesn't become a good person at the end. Like, she doesn't change as a person. She's a terrible person at the beginning, she's a terrible person at the end. And I'm fine with that. And that's who she is. And she's not going to become a better person, like, ever.
First of all, I think Chloe is an icon and I think she's a great person. I wish I was as confident as Chloe. If I was as confident as Chloe.
Me too. I would love to be as confident as her, but
maybe we should just like, I don't know, actually, not to like girl bossify this, but like maybe we should like do like a 10-day challenge where we're just like confident like Chloe. Wait, is that a business idea? Anyways, what kind of shenanigans?
Stay out of trouble.
Yeah, I'm gonna try it and I'm gonna let you know how it goes. Just gonna roam the streets of New York, just like knocking copies out of people's hands. Anyways, but kind of going back to what you were saying, like other, besides Chloe's arc, what are some of those natural tensions that you think your book is going to bring out in your readers that you kind of like are looking forward to? Like, what are the ways that you think you're challenging your readers?
For one, I think there's a lot of people that want likable characters. And some people find Chloe is unlikable, but a lot of people love her. But there's a lot of other people who, I used to look at like negative Goodreads reviews and I don't anymore. But some people were like, the characters in this book are unlikable. And I was like, well, A, they're psychopaths, and B, it's not really a spoiler. Andre is not a psychopath, so I'm not sure what you don't like about him because he's adorable.
He's so cute.
Poor little Andre. So the unlikable thing, I'm certainly challenging on that. I mean, I think I do think compared to a lot of other psychological thrillers, I personally feel like it's more of an old-fashioned story about characters trying to solve a mystery as opposed to like twist, twist, twist. So there's that, and I'm curious to see how people are responding to that. And I also think I don't think there's a lot of thrillers that are funny. There's certainly mysteries that are in the form of cozy mysteries, but thrillers that are like dark and funny, I don't think there's a lot of them. So I think people end up being kind of pleasantly surprised. Recently, one of my professional reviews said that I had a twisted sense of humor. Oh well, I'll take that as a compliment. But yeah, those are the things, the main ones, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, what's the difference between a cozy mystery and a regular mystery?
A cozy mystery is one where someone does get killed, there's a murder, but it's not, the main character isn't in peril. They're not going to get stabbed to death or like sexually assaulted or something. And they're often like, there's a lot of like cute aspects to them. Like often there's like, they're running, like a coffee shop and there's like a cute cat or dog or something, like Murder, She Wrote. Like Angela Lansbury is never in peril. She's just solving mysteries and like typing away. So it's like kind of a comfortable place to go to solve a mystery, and even though someone's dead, but it's like, there's no gore, basically. Yeah. This book has gore. It is not a cozy.
No. It's not cozy at all, but and it's like really fast. Like I have read multiple versions and I still missed my train stop when I was going into Manhattan reading this book that I've already read.
Yeah, I remember many years ago, I think it was 2016 or 15, I was at a conference called Lit Camp and everyone was talking about All the Light We Cannot See. And about, I was like, oh, it's a World War II novel, I don't want to read it. Like, no, it has these short chapters. And I was like, oh, short chapters. So when I wrote this book, all of the chapters, I think virtually all of them are 10 or under manuscript pages. And there's some that are even shorter. And I know that leads to the kind of like propulsive. The only time they're longer is if there's a big set piece and it has to go over 10. But I wanted every chapter to be 10 or under and to have a clue drop. And all of them do except for chapter 2.
Yeah.
Which I guess maybe has a clue drop. I don't know. But
it zips. But also, okay, folks, we've got some questions. So feel free to drop more questions in the chat. I'll ask these and then I'll ask others. But Sarah wanted to know about what exactly inspired you for the book.
First of all, it was my wanting to write like a female character with a brain. There was like that percolating, but I had heard about a behavioral treatment facility for young men, like a juvenile detention where for psychopathic men, where psychopathy is known for being really difficult to treat. When these people had developed a treatment program where everything was phrased in terms of what reward you would get, rather than, it's not that you shouldn't hit that boy because hitting someone is morally wrong or because it hurts them, but you shouldn't hit that boy because if you don't, you'll get 10 minutes of TV time. Because psychopaths are reward driven, but they're not afraid of punishment. So I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then I was like, what if there was a school like that? And then I thought that was too many. And then I was like, well, what if this was just a program of like 7? And I thought with 7, you could have a kind of locked room feeling, even though this isn't technically a locked room mystery. And then I love college novels, whether they're mysteries or not. Like any college novel I will read. And I loved season 3 of Veronica Mars, which was in college. Like I could have stayed there forever because college is such a great setting for mysteries. So college, mystery, psychopath, and put those 3 together.
That's a really good point, because I know, like, I went to Ohio State, which is enormous, but it's also like, the same people all the time. And then there's like, Columbus is a city outside of it, but it just somehow you're just subsumed by everything Ohio State. You never leave like the boundaries of like Lane and High, and like it's kind of crazy like how
and like John Adams, which if you couldn't guess is a joke about George Washington University. It's like John Adams. That is a college that feels like you're in the city, but you're also on campus. You feel like kind of insulated, but you could also go to the Washington Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, or the Arboretum, or like different places in DC, but still feel like you're in like a college setting.
Actually, the Arboretum is a great place for some crime. Did I tell you about when I accidentally got locked in the Arboretum? I'll tell you about it later. It was really weird.
I did think about that. There is that great place in the Arboretum where they have the columns that used to be the old part of Congress, which is like a great place, like to murder someone. But Chloe was like, well, there's probably a security guard there, which I think there probably is. Because of the bonsai collection.
Just one guy, and he just drives around, and I know because I had to call him to let me out of the Arboretum.
If you're not a DC resident, there is a bonsai collection there where there are bonsais there that are older than the country of America. Like they came over and they're like from the 1700s. It's absolutely beautiful, and you should go in and see them in the Arboretum. I need sponsorship by the U.S. Arboretum.
I also love the Arboretum, which I like to call it a tree zoo to annoy men who care about plants.
Kind of what it is.
But okay, next question. How often are you in contact with your agent and your editor?
It depends on if something's in the hopper. Like if something's going on, we're like talking a lot more. Like when we were going on submission, I was emailing and calling with my agent a lot. When we're going through the editorial process, you'll like talk about the edits, and then respond, but probably sometime, and then maybe you'll have a call about the publicity or marketing plan. But I mean, it's not every day. I also feel like I only want to talk unless there's like business. So I'm not really calling them to talk about feelings. So I think it's probably different for every person. I think there's probably some agents or editors who like rarely ever talk to their authors, or maybe talk a lot more. But I just feel like it depends a lot on personality, I think.
Thank you. And next question, which part of Never Saw Me Coming was the hardest for you to write? And what was the quickest part for you to write?
Well, I mean, the easiest part, I think, is Chloe's voice. I think the hardest part, interestingly, was writing Andre, who's one of the main characters. He is an 18-year-old Black freshman, and I really wanted to get it right. Like I'm a minority. That doesn't mean I know what it is to be Black. So, and I'd written Black characters before, but not a POV character. If you look on my blog, I also wrote a long blog post about this. But in the very first draft, I think I was so scared about getting it wrong. His actual character came off very rabbity, like he was like scared of everything all the time. I think it just manifested that way. And as we kept working on it, his character kept coming up, and it was both my agent and my editor brought up like the stakes need to be clear for him, the stakes. And I was like, the stakes are so clear for Andre. He does not want to be murdered. Someone's trying to murder him. But then I realized it was kind of like he plays such an important role emotionally in the book that the stakes, you had to like feel it for him. You had to like feel like his family and stuff, and like him walking around campus. So it took me a while to get that right. And I wanted to do it well, and I wanted that emotionality to come out, because I do think that there's such a hook to Chloe and some of the other characters, but the hook for Andre is this like emotional hook.
And this is somewhat related, but what was the most fun part of writing this book?
I mean, I love the little shout outs to DC. We actually got our celebration cake from Buttercream, which is mentioned in the book itself. Although I don't know if Will would actually go to Buttercream. I feel like he'd go to Starbucks. I think I really love writing humor. I like writing jokes, and even when I read this book back, even though I wrote it, I still laugh at the jokes.
Yeah.
I'm that kind of person.
I'll say the funnest part for me, who this is not about, was talking about the logistics of different murder scenarios, which is not something I get to do very often.
Oh yeah, one of the scenes that I really like is like Chloe is very matter-of-factly like, well, I can't kill him at Rock Creek Park because it's fall and there are lots of leaves and I want to set him on fire. And she's just like very like casually being like, I want to set him on fire and I don't want to cause a conflagration. But that's just who she is. I love that scene.
Me too. It's really good. Jessica says 6 weeks is crazy to write a draft, which is true. Facts. Can you talk more about writing that much in such a small amount of time?
Yeah, and I will say this. You do not have to wake up at 5 a.m. You do not have to stay up late at night. You don't have to like do something crazy, which everyone's always like, you have to do that if you want to do it. I would write between 6 p.m. and 7:15, which is when I went to the gym. And then I would write a little on the weekends. But when I'm there, I am there and I'm typing whatever, 70 words per minute or something. I'm typing the whole time. So yeah, that was fast, but I wasn't killing myself to do it. You can have a life and still be a writer. I will say that I have the privilege. I don't have kids and I don't clean my house like ever. But and I don't cook, but like you can do it. Like you just have to make the time. I think like a lot of people have the dream of writing a novel. Like the main thing is sitting your ass in a chair and doing it. And that's like the main problem, is doing it.
Speak for all lazy people when I say that was not what I wanted to hear.
But I also feel like I'm lazy because then I'll write a novel and then I won't write for 4 months and I'm watching old episodes of Survivor from 1999 for hundreds of hours. So, I don't write every day. You don't have to write every day.
Yeah. And then Curtis said congrats and that you liked, okay, I'm not going to do this whole part, Curtis. I'm so sorry. Do you have any plans for telling more stories or spin-offs from this Adams University universe?
Oh,
what is the Adams cinematic universe? Like,
I don't.
It's the Avengers.
They all develop superpowers.
A battle between the psychopaths from one university versus the other university.
It's Georgetown too. I'm just bitter because I didn't get in there. Which is what totally Chloe's bitter about not getting in there. I didn't get in there. So the next book I'm working on is not part of the Adams Cinematic Universe. I don't know if we've heard The Last of Chloe, because if you haven't heard, I've sold the film TV rights to this book. So intellectual property, not the book itself, but the whole shebang. So we might return to Chloe at some point. The next book will be a little different. And I'm excited to do something a little different. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually that kind of leads to a different question. I'm going to skip around now. Jason says the tier 1 group inquires if you will be going back to sci-fi themes in future novels.
The tier 1 is a reference to my stratification of friends on tiers.
Wait, am I on tier?
You're tier 0, which is the highest tier. Yeah.
Oh, thank God. I was pinned to the top.
What, so the science fiction, yeah. So the science fiction was intended to be a series, and I wrote 2 of those books. I still kind of have those characters bonking around my head. I just watched The Expanse, which is like amazing, as you know, and if you haven't watched it, you should. It has great characters. So I mean, at some point I'm interested in doing it in some context. I don't know if it would be writing books, but possibly something else, or I don't know. You know, all of this just happened to me in a year, and all of a sudden I have a book, and it's real.
Yeah, that's crazy. What was it like? Because right, we were like creeping in your apartment. You got the call from the agent, and then they sold it, but then it was a panini, and then now here we are. Like, what has that been like? Because I know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the absolute dream you could have as a writer is to get an agent, sell the book in a couple days, and it's a big deal. And then we signed with the UK, and that was a big deal. And then we signed with film TV, and that was a big deal. All of this happened in like a few days after the George Floyd protests, and there were helicopters flying. I was on total COVID lockdown, hadn't seen you or any of my friends because I was too scared. I was having intermittent COVID cries. So it was literally like 2020 was like the best of times and the worst of times. Of like, I felt like I was not allowed to be happy. So many people were suffering, and like, well, how do you have a right to be happy about this? And like, the happiest part for me was not getting the deal, but it was like telling you guys about the deal, because then I was allowed to be happy via other people. But I still like, it's September 11th today. Like,
Yeah.
How do we think about having food when there's people who are hungry and like that type of thing? And, you know, I know through the pandemic, thinking about this thing on the horizon helped me get through it. And like, I was not reading War and Peace or doing something profound during the pandemic. I was rewatching Lost and The Bachelor and stuff. Like, that's what got me through it. So if one of the greatest things that my I think my British editors said, that like, oh, this book brought me out of the pandemic and it took me to another place, and it was like, oh, it just made me tear up. Like, that, okay, people need entertainment and they need to laugh. And I have not written War and Peace, but if I made you laugh, that's all I can ask for. Then I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Shoot, this is the best thing that's happened to me throughout the pandemic.
But like, that honestly, it meant a lot to me that like friends were telling me like, nothing good is going on, but this makes me happy.
It's really cool. And okay, let's see what other questions we have. Oh, these are fun ones. Sarah, if you are familiar with The Bachelor, do you know who you're talking to? V loves The Bachelor. Who would Chloe want to kill, marry, or shag?
Okay, so I have to admit something to you. There is a character in the book named Chad who I pictured like Chad Johnson, the greatest villain of all time in The Bachelor, but he has the opposite personality, because Chad, the character, is a wonderful human being, unless he's a killer, because he might be. But that's a good question. I mean, I think Chloe is very shallow, so I think she'd probably want to go for whoever the hottest one is, and that's very subjective. And then kill, oh gosh, Jed, probably.
That's the one, the singer, right? The
Jed, yeah, he was a liar. And, marriage is a hard one because I don't know if Chloe would want to get married because she's going to be a doctor and then she doesn't want anyone to take her money. Unless I can see her having a string of husbands that she kills. So that's a hard one.
And another fun question, what is Chloe's perfect day? And she also wanted to compliment your lipstick, which I agree is.
It's MAC. Yeah, it smears very easily. I think that actually Chloe is, you don't see too much of this in the book, but she actually is someone who like would enjoy going to class, like getting your expensive latte, going to class, taking notes, hanging out with her dorm girlfriends and like doing relational aggression against them. You know what I mean? Like, oh, like I can make your hair look better. That doesn't look good on you. And then like going out to a club till 4 a.m. and having like 10 shots of cheap vodka and or triple sec. And then going to like whatever the midnight food place is. Back in my day in DC, there was two. There was a burger place and an Indian place. And then you come home and go to sleep and somehow wake up and not be hungover.
Well, that's my perfect day.
Yeah, it doesn't work anymore for me. Yeah, I'm too old for that.
No, my knee would hurt before 4 a.m. But yeah. Let's see. We've got some anonymous. Sorry, it just made it seem more exciting. Anonymous attendee number 1 wants to know. Okay, I imagine you have some different ideas for what your second book might be. Are you going to pick one based solely on what you feel like writing in the moment, or will you ask your agent for input on different options?
Yeah, it's kind of like a group decision. I mean, I talked to my agent first, and then I actually ended up talking to both my agent and my editor in person. I finally got to meet them in person because of the pandemic, and we talked about, because it's also a strategic decision about your career and what is the best decision for your career, and also like what you feel like writing and what are your ideas. So it's kind of a collaborative decision. I imagine there's some writers out there who are like, this is what I'm going to write no matter what. But like I'm also kind of thinking about what is the best move for my career too.
Yeah. And we've got one more question, which is perfect timing. Did you hire an editor prior to querying / getting an agent?
No, I tricked people like Everdeen into reading my book for free. I mean, I'm not a big believer in that you need to hire an editor. I mean, I think most writers will form a community of writers that they know, that and they all share each other's work. And then you decide what input to take and what not to take, and then you can go out and query.
Yeah. Okay. This is the last question from Monique. Which of your characters would you want to meet most in real life, and which would you not?
Hi, Monique. I mean, I feel like people have really differing opinions about Chloe. Like if I knew Chloe in real life, I would steer clear. Other people would want to hang with her. There's another character in the book who is a psychopath, who I'm not going to say who it is, who I think would be really fun to hang out with. Because that person also probably, no, I can't say that. It's a spoiler. Like Chloe is someone that might harm you. I mean, the worst she does to her roommate is steal food out of her fridge, but she's someone who is potentially dangerous. She will hook up with your boyfriend. She will sabotage your chance of getting that RA ship in the biology department. So I wouldn't want to be friends with her. I'm sure she's fun to hang with at a party, unless she's like going after the boy you want, which is what she would do just for fun.
Okay. And then last question, which character was inspired by me, even though you definitely wrote it before we became friends? I will be offended by every answer.
I can throw in a character in my next book that's patterned after you, and Everbean, autocorrect Everbean.
Everbean, Basin.
Oh.
Anyways, well, I think we've done it.
What a great event. Thank you, ladies, both so much, Vera and Everdeen. What a lovely conversation. And thank you everyone out there for joining us today. Your patronage is what enables us to host programming like this. And we can't continue to do it without the book sales to support it. So as a gentle reminder, the book link is in the chat, or just visit the website. And while you're there, check out our events listing. We'd love to see you at another event soon. And don't forget, it's the member sale this week. You can get 20% off. Never Saw Me Coming. Thank you so much. I wish we had more time. It's such a great conversation. And Everdeen, I'm sorry that we had an older bio for you. Thank you for correcting us.
Oh, no big.
All right,
Thank you
take
for
care,
coming.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.